Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. We're happy to have you here in the chaos that is cybersecurity. Welcome to Criticality Live, presented by our partner, Secure Nation. It's a show where we cut through the noise, challenge assumptions, and talk honestly about the state of cybersecurity, where we get to where cyber is unfiltered. All right, enough about the intro. Let's get to our guest. Nathan has spent decades in the cybersecurity space doing parts that most people avoid and actually making cybersecurity actually work.
Hmm.
He's built and led programs across government, nonprofits, enterprise environments, operating from the keyboard all the way up to the boardroom. What sets him apart is simple. He translates security into something that business can understand and then acts on it, which is the key part that most folks forget. It's not theory, it's not noise, it's just real world cybersecurity that holds up when it matters. So, welcome to Criticality Live, Nathan.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for joining us. So, Nathan, you spent decades in this space, and not just watching it evolve, but shaping how organizations actually approach security in the real world. So, I want to rewind a little bit because we like to see where people are now and how they got to where they are and the path that got them to be built the way they are. So, going back to the beginning, what was your first true entry point into cybersecurity? Was it intentional, or did you get pulled into it like a lot of us did by accident, or just landing into the right role at the right time?
Well, I mean, I think for most any of us who've been doing this more than 20 or 25 years, if you didn't fall into it by accident, I question how that happened. Um, y- I trace it back honestly to high school for me, which is longer ago than I care to actually tell you or the audience today. But I started off in technology, literally walking into my school's library and saw the three librarians there hovering over a really old green monochrome mainframe terminal, trying to figure out a new card catalog system. And they were really struggling. They were really confused. And I just honestly, I walked over and asked if I could help. And the three of them got very excited and sat me down and said, yeah, you figure this out. Go, 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 go. And they all left me there. And I ended up a month or two later getting employed by the state of California while I was still a high school student to manage and give demonstrations of all this technology that had been invested into our school as a test bed to see if technology would help students learn. So I was responsible not just for figuring out how to use it, but how to keep it secure from all the other kids who were trying to break into it as well. Um, I had to learn very, very quickly about how to harden old, OS2 warp systems and Windows 3.1. Am I dating myself enough for that?
I mean, you're dating me because I was the kid that was trying to break into those things.
See, and you're why I was getting paid in high school for this job. It's great. Um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I started learning about the concepts of security and what needed to be done. It was just trying to keep everything up and running at that time. Um, and kind of just found a love for it. I really loved that idea of using the same kind of concepts of how to build the thing, but to protect it and keep it up and running and live. And I was very fortunate from there that I found job opportunities after high school and kind of kept going down that road.
I think that's probably the most adorable origin story that I've heard. Like I was in the library and I helped them, like Boy Scout, adorable. So I just want to put that out there. But was there anything that made you realize, like through your, whether it was like working for, with the state of California or anything like that, that made you realize it was more than just IT, it was more than just these systems. That you learned how to secure these IT systems from fellow students, but that security is going to end up being its own discipline, whether then or in the future?
I don't know if I really had a light bulb moment on that particular thing. So when I got out of high school, I ended up in government proper. I sort of did my career backwards, where a lot of people end their career retiring in government. I started there, but I worked for a county agency. And so as a county, you've got healthcare systems, you've got Department of Justice related law enforcement systems, social services. You have all these differently regulated kinds of businesses, right? And working in the IT department, trying to support all of these things at the time, it was just help people figure out how to print and read their emails and just do the basic IT help desk kind of thing. But you start to talk to people as they go through the business motions, right? I can't print because, or I'm trying to help, print a patient record. And you start to realize that this stuff, when it breaks down, affects people's lives. And yes, I'm going to play into the Boy Scout thing now.
Ugh,
I,
sorry.
no, I really did. I mean, my whole thing is I really love just helping people. And so as I started to frame this idea of like, yeah, this is more than just keeping stuff up and running. If this stuff goes down, people's lives are affected, and you're working in those kinds of government agencies. It's very direct, right? You're front line of that. So, starting to watch this whole thing with IT convert into more of a business function, into more of this, we really need to take this stuff more seriously beyond just responding to help desk tickets and making sure that we were hitting our quota for how many tickets we close in a week. It became a lot clearer that security was, necessary as its own function, and really, as a part of that kind of business adjacent thing. Now, it certainly at the government level was not formalized that way, but in the perfection of hindsight, I look back on that and go, oh yeah, that's where it was all starting, was just that realization that this is tech but business aligned, and we need to keep these systems protected for people. So I to an extent, but I don't think my 19 and 20-year-old self saw it that way.
So, leaning into the hindsight kind of comment that you had, was there an experience early in your career, whether it was the government or the nonprofit or the enterprise, that kind of fundamentally shaped how you operate today versus what you thought you were going to be doing?
Yeah. I'll give you two hopefully quick ones here, because there are two different parts to it. So when I was in high school, actually, I wanted to be a college professor. That was my goal in life, was to be an educator. And that's not quite where I went. Had to get a job out of high school, had to figure it out. And honestly, was really kind of sad about that. So carried on for a few years. I built my expertise. I started to become kind of the senior Windows security person in the agency. And then I got asked to start teaching like the Microsoft Office classes for users who were old mainframe users who had never used a mouse before, like literally having to teach them to right click. And after the first couple of classes, I got a lot of good feedback, and people came up to me and said, man, I actually learned something. Thank you so much. And I realized, like, oh, I'm teaching. Like, this is it. This is the thing I wanted to do when I was in school. Like, I'm doing it right now. It's not at a college, but it's still in the classroom, and it's still helping people, and it's still what I thought. So I had that light bulb moment sitting in a 8-person computer lab training area that we had set up for the county, realizing that's what it was about. I think the other side of it, though, was when I did get into a formal security practice, part of the role was to go out to department heads and help advocate for budget for security programs at a time when nobody even knew what anything was, right? So we're not even just talking about, cyber attacks are bad, please give me budget to protect us. It was literally, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I still want money from you to go protect these things you can't see. And I had a department head at the county, after we had a pretty lengthy meeting, pulled me aside and he said, so what is it going to take for you to work for me? And I said, well, I don't understand. I do work for you. I just work from the security team for the whole county. He said, no. The IT director has been on my case about this for a year, and I had no idea what he was saying. Now I get it. Now I want to have this stuff. I want to build a really good program because what we do is serious. But how do I get you to sit in with me and help me understand this stuff as we go on? And it was a light bulb moment. Like, that was another one of those moments of just like, wait a second. Like, this is going to be the thing. It's going to be a communication problem. It's going to be an education thing. It's going to be helping people understand why this stuff is serious when they have no concept of what it is at all. And trying to take a concept that's so foreign to people and bring it into the light where they go, now I'll get behind it. Now I'll support it. Now I'll bring money to the table. Now I'll direct my team. I'll build a better team, whatever it's going to be. I think those were kind of those two turning point moments for me where I said, yeah, this is really what I want to do. This is the way that I want to approach security, how I want to build programs. Because if I can get buy-in from a team or from a department or from a whole company, then we can shape what we need to shape from a security program standpoint, and we can have success. So it was those two things together kind of got me sold on the concept of security, and all the tech stuff just became incidental, like frankly. So here we are.
Yeah.
Kayla and I talk about translating bits and bytes into dollars and cents. Cents being with the starting with S, not with a C, being kind of the key thing that separates somebody from being good at security as a technology versus security as a leadership piece.
Yeah. It's really important. And I think part of that importance of understanding, the bits and bytes to dollars and cents piece is failure. So was there a failure or a mistake early in your career that, changed how you think about security or even about leadership?
No, I did everything perfectly. Are you absolutely
Okay, your
kidding me?
voice
Like,
call, I forgot.
I
Voice call, yeah.
perfect security. It can happen. It's totally a thing. We've all gotten there, right? We've all done that. No, I failed a lot over the time. Um, yeah, one of the situations that stands out for me about that, I was responsible for our patch management system back in those days, and so this was pre WSUS. For those of you, I'm going to date myself again. For those of you who are big Alteris fans, we were using that way back. This is before Symantec had them, so this was early stages of Windows-based software delivery at a time when patching was still questionable. I mean, kudos to the vendors out there who have dialed that practice in, have gotten really good. But back in those days, it was a little bit of a like, will this patch kill everything or not kind of moment every time you deployed something. And yeah, unfortunately, I had one of those situations where I rushed through testing. I did not validate on a couple of really key systems about this one patch. We ended up deploying, and I took out 75% of the systems in our hospital.
Oh.
So,
oh dear.
full paper, backed up to paper practices and a lot of chaos, and just an absolute heart sinking kind of feeling. I mean, forget the panic of I've got to get everything back up and running again, but it was just the knowing that I had caused that, and just my own fault. Like I blew it. I blew the process. I didn't do what I wrote. Like I built that process. I knew what to do. Just hurried through it and didn't take my time and do that. So yeah, that was a hard lesson, and it really for me reinforced the practices of good testing and practices of good, having a good, strong process and making sure that we're revisiting those things all the time to make sure that, is this testing enough? Am I really sure that this is safe when I deploy whatever I'm going to deploy? We have a lot more checks and balances now than we did back then, but that was a good object lesson for me to have that stuck in my head for the rest of my life.
I feel that deeply in my soul. I had a similar experience early in my career with Java patches, where we had a lot of software applications that required a very particular version of Java. And if you update it like you were supposed to the newest version of Java, it broke everything. It broke the leave processing system. It broke the financial systems. It broke, the HR systems. It was absolutely horrendous. And you create exemption list, and then somebody would swap out a computer, and part of the reason why I'm bald, other than my three daughters.
I mean, I feel like JRE, if back in those days, like we all had a JRE exception spreadsheet of some sort of like, these systems have to stay on this version. These systems have to stay on this version. These systems, and you had to manage all the different versions of Java because that was just such a common thing back then to have it hard coded to versions.
So, kind of pulling on that thread a little bit, was there something that kind of clicked in your head where you had to shift from being purely technical into really understanding the business side of the house more than what you had previously done?
Again, I don't know if there was a single kind of light bulb moment for me in that particular thing. I mean, I absolutely was deeply embedded on the technical side. That was what my job really was, right? Was to manage all these systems and do the technical part. But I spent 15 years in government. So I spent a lot of time in front of politicians, boards, senior department heads, those kinds of folks, because we were building a thing that had never existed before. There was no concept of security before my team. And, I think over time, just the more I spoke with people at all levels and seeing them get a light bulb moment when I realized that they understood why this stuff was important. It wasn't just that the security team was being mean by making you have a long password. There was really a reason behind why we were trying to enforce long passwords and what we were trying to accomplish. And when you had the average user or receptionist, someone go, "Oh, yeah, it's annoying, but I see why you're doing that. I get it now."
Yeah.
You have enough of those moments where you start to realize that, yeah, the technical piece I can learn and I can always figure that out. But the communication piece is the one that's getting me wins. Like, that's where I'm getting buy-in. That's where people stop fighting. That's where I get fewer obstacles in management. This is where everything starts to kind of flow the way you need to, and you're trusted as the person who understands the tech. But once they understand that you understand them and their problem, now all of a sudden you're that bridge that connects the things, and that's where success starts to flow. Whatever success looks like in the moment. So I think for me, it was a lot of years of having those small moments of understanding that finally got me to a point where I realized, and especially as I was starting to move into leadership roles, it was like, that's the thing. That's the job. More than anything else, that's the job. And for me, I just dove into it at that point and still do that to this day.
Yeah, I harp on here all the time that I feel like GRC is that function now, like dedicated to that technical converting to, the business speak, where, before GRC became a thing, you learned it through exactly what you mentioned, this path up throughout your career. Like, oh, so-and-so isn't understanding what I'm saying, so I need to say it differently. Just like, that first job that you got, that approach, you explained it correctly. I like this. Like, let's iterate on that. I think is really important, because you still see it, of course, today. But that lesson has been learned over especially, the past 10 years, where the tech is just moving so fast and people have to be able to clearly articulate it. But speaking of, not to quote Taylor Swift and be one of those people, but eras in your career in cybersecurity, do you have any opinions on things that we used to get right back then that we've lost today?
Boy, did we get anything right back then? I wonder sometimes. Like,
Oregon Trail. That was the last thing that we got right.
That's
my generation.
Oh man, no, that's I could be on board for that one. I could really be convinced that's a good one. I don't know that this is an apples to apples comparison. And I'll tell you why, because I have kind of this rolling theory that I give sometimes in talks that I do recently. More than 20 years ago, security was really just an extension of IT. Right? We were those people who were just figuring it out. There was all this new technology, all this new stuff happening, and those of us who realized, like, hey, wait a second, we probably shouldn't be letting people just download anything. Like, maybe we should stop that practice. It seems unsafe.
That's crazy.
That's why you're the unpopular opinion guy. But we were the ones who said no, and suddenly we're like, yeah, you should be on the security team. Go. That's where we were, right? It was this just kind of figuring it out. But while we were implementing all this new technology, we were trying to build security layers alongside of it. So the early days were very much a technology-focused implementation of security strategy, very technical. Mm-hmm. But you fast forward, say, to 10 years ago or so, roughly, everything became risk-based, right? We started talking about risk management as part of the practice. We started talking about getting aligned with the business. You heard more and more people saying, well, wait a second, these metrics aren't working because I keep telling the board how many vulnerabilities we found during the last scan, and they don't seem to care for some reason about that. Well, yeah, because they don't live in that world, right? But part of, I think, why we moved into risk management was because the implementation is essentially done, right? We all had firewalls. We all had endpoint security. We all had intrusion detection. We all had our basic fundamental security tooling. Now we had to do something more with it. So the eras, to use your term there about this, shifted. We're no longer doing a technology focused implementation only kind of strategy.
Yeah.
The era changed into this more business aligned risk management thing. And I think we're changing again now with AI becoming so dominant. The speed of the technology is forcing some changes in how all of that works even. Traditional risk management isn't even the conversation so much anymore. So I don't know. I mean, what we did back then, we did right because that's what needed to be done. We implemented well. We learned really good techniques for implementing tools and controls really well. That helped us build some foundations for risk management concepts. But when we shifted as security into that more business aligned, less technical risk translation tool inside the organization, completely different skill set. Now it's all about communication. Now it's all about soft skills. Now everything is about speed and building guardrails rather than absolute controls. And it just, I mean, I just don't know if it's really a one-to-one relationship where we could look at it that way anymore.
No, I think that's absolutely fair. It's moving too fast for it to be like that one-to-one. So I think, yeah, that's a really fair statement to make for sure.
So I know for me, there are some key people and points in time that really changed my approach to cybersecurity as a whole. Did you have some mentors or bad environments or just a situation you were in that influenced how you think?
Oh my God, I could go on for days about this. Look, I spent the early parts of my career in government, so I have all kinds of stories about, I was taught how to do the right thing by witnessing all the wrong things. Like, I have plenty of those stories. But I do want to call out the very, very first CISO that I ever worked for, honestly gave me my career. I owe him in a lot of ways everything. I was at a time in my early career where was struggling with some really horrifically bad management, trying to do the right thing and being kind of sold out and thrown under the bus for it. It was a really, really kind of difficult time. And he took me on into his brand new security team cold. And in fact, I learned later that some of the upper management folks had told him that, oh, we're trying to fire that guy. You don't want him. He's terrible. And our CISO said, no, I've spoken to him. He seems like he knows what he's doing. I'll take him on. We'll see what happens. Like, give me a month or so. And let's just see what happens. And I didn't know any of that was happening at the time. But after a month or so, we had some really incredible successes. We revamped the whole patch management system. We had some big changes in the vulnerability assessment system. And he kind of went back to management and was like, well, clearly wasn't the employee's fault. Like, he seems to be doing just fine. I'll keep him. Thanks. Have a nice day. And so he was a really, really major factor for me. A lot of great advice. He helped guide a lot of my views on security programs in general. And I think the one thing that always stood out to me most was he used to love saying, you have to tell them 17 times, 17 different ways. It was his favorite thing about communication strategies. He's like, go send them an email and also go take them out to lunch and also, go walk by their cubicle and also write a newsletter and. You've got to find 17 different ways to communicate and you've got to do it 17 times. And I loved that. I loved that idea that it can't just be send an email and expect everything's done. It can't just be walk into a meeting and we all agree on the action items and then expect that it's all going to be done. He was really, really big in that idea that people connect to information in different ways, at different times, where they are in their day, where they are in their lives. The information sticks better during different moments. So it's a philosophy I've always taken with me 17 times, 17 different ways, and I'll never forget him and never be ungrateful to him for passing that along to me.
That's a great segue because I do want to move into leadership. Because obviously you've seen the evolution of security from the ground level all the way up. And obviously, as anything, your perspective is going to shift. When was when you first stepped into a leadership role, what surprised you the most about leading versus doing security?
Well, I'm going to echo what you just said. It changed a little bit over time. I mean, I think the initial hit for me was how little technical work I was doing. So I had to really adjust through missing hands on keyboard and pulling up my dashboards and looking at what was going on every day. That was a big part of it. I also I found that there was that at least probably the first time I was a proper CISO, the kind of inherent leadership bias that can happen from the non-leadership folks. You know, you're one day you're one of the team, the next minute, oh, you're one of them.
Yeah.
Right. And this is even people like, come on, man, you know me. We've worked together for years. You know who I am. Like, well, yeah, but now you're sitting at the other table. We don't know. I was a little surprised by that. I really thought that the relationships I have were going to carry over kind of the same way as I moved up into a leadership role. And not to say those relationships went south by any stretch of the imagination. They just changed very dramatically. And you had to learn how to work through some of those biases and that stereotyping. But that one took me a little bit by surprise. Because like a week ago, I was the person with you saying, yeah, the leadership people, forget those people. They don't know what they're talking about. Now I'm the guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. Great. But it was a good lesson learned, right? I mean, it helped me approach those jobs a little bit differently. And sometimes that distance can be useful. There are times. And then there are other times where, you do have to figure out ways to bridge that gap and reassure people at every level of the organization, especially your direct subordinates, that you're not the enemy, that you're not there to just be heavy-handed and do whatever the director says or the CEO says. So it was a good lesson for me.
So you've mentioned it, we've mentioned it quite a few times about translating security into business terms. What's in your opinion, and it could be unpopular, I'm always down for that, a mistake that we make as security leaders when trying to communicate risk to executives?
Yeah, I to be honest, I give talks about this quite a lot. I'm 3 years life. I've literally built talks around this exact topic because it is such a common thing. But one of the things I often lean back into, and I think it's really important for folks in cybersecurity these days, especially because it's understood better now. I mean, people understand what a data breach is. They kind of understand what happens when their financial information gets lost. Like the general population kind of gets a little bit of what cybersecurity is about. Enough. And I find that people who've been doing this for a very, very long time, they fall into the trap of what's referred to in psychology as the burden of knowledge concept, or curse of knowledge. Sometimes it's phrased as. It's an idea that came out of studies for primarily medical professionals. It was later applied to lawyers and legal professionals. But it's the idea that when you are burdened with so much training and knowledge and expertise about a subject, like doctors are, so all the training they go through and the education and everything else, that burden of knowledge causes you to be biased towards that knowledge set, right? So the problem in the medical field was, patients would come in and go, gosh, doctor, my head hurts. I don't know what's wrong. And the doctor would say, oh, it could be an aneurysm. It could be cancer. It could be a bleed happening between your skull and your brain. Like, we've got to look into this. Let's get tests. Let's do MRIs. Let's do CATs. Let's do the thing because, it could be bad. Never bothered to ask the patient, well, what happened? And the patient said, well, yeah, I walked into a door. Right. So it's not cancer and it's not an aneurysm. It's none of that. It's just the patient had like a doofy moment and walked into a door. But that burden of knowledge, because you know about aneurysms, you know about cancer, you know about bleeds, you're biased towards that knowledge. And we in cybersecurity, when we communicate about it, we do the exact same thing all the time.
Yeah.
The number of times that I have advised CISOs who have said to me, I don't know why my board doesn't give me budget. And I say, are your quarterly metrics, when you go to them, are you still telling them like number of probe attempts on the perimeter and number of vulnerabilities found in the environment? They go, yeah. How'd you know that? because that's why you're not getting buy-in, because you think in your head it's such a simplistic idea, right? The word vulnerability, we kind of all know what that means. So if I tell them it's a big number, even if they don't understand what the different vulns are, they'll get it. Big plus bad. It's scary. Haha, let's go do it. But that's wrong. That knowledge is really specialized. Like, we understand the concept of what a vulnerability is and what that number really means. And we can have another conversation about whether that large number is even meaningful at all. If we want to talk about prioritization strategies and all that good fun stuff. But we get caught in that bias, that burden of knowledge, where we are so intimately knowledgeable about all things scary in the cybersecurity world, and we assume that everybody else gets it too. And so we go confidently with our metrics, we go confidently with our board presentations, or with our weekly webinars to our employees, or anything like that, and we just assume they know what an asset is, they know what a vulnerability is, they know what risk means, they know what those words mean, don't they? I get it, it's so simple for me, so clearly they do too. And we are wrong. Like, full stop, we are wrong every time we do that. So
Yeah.
we've said this now, I think, a dozen times in this whole webinar so far about it's communication, right? It all comes back to communication for me. And this is one of those things that, as security professionals at any level, not just leadership, if you are at the entry level of your career in cybersecurity, you have to be good at taking these ideas that you know so well that you could just close your eyes and see the spreadsheet in your head of like all the vulnerabilities that are there. Great. No one else in the world does that. You're really the only one. So figure out a way to communicate that in the most simple terms possible to anyone else in your organization. Never assume that they understand it the way you do. That fundamentally, if you can bridge that particular gap of how you approach it and understand that bias exists in your own head, it will improve the way you communicate tenfold. Just that alone. So that's a big one for me. And it's such a common problem that I see up and down the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting. Like, so let's kind of like dig into that burden of knowledge a little bit, which is not where I thought I was going to go next when we first started this piece. So I just like the term, and I think, listening to you, I think, is really interesting, because there's going to always be a tension between like what the business wants and what security requires. So the burden of knowledge on us, of course, is to articulate better. But how do you handle when they're just completely opposite and direct conflict with each other? Is it compromise? Is it just wait and see? What do you kind of do there?
This is solved by a blue ink pen.
Oh, I've got black.
Okay, well, you gotta have to use blue, and I'll explain why. Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a massive problem. It happens all the time, and I think one of the things that we also struggle with in the cybersecurity industry, and again, especially those of us who've been doing this for a really long time, because a lot of us did start off as Boy Scouts. Like, a lot of us did believe we were going to try to save the world a little bit. We were going to protect the internet. This new thing, the internet, we're going to protect everybody. We're going to save the day. There's a little bit of that white knight superhero complex in all of us. That's why we got into this industry in many of us, many cases. And you have to realize you can't save everyone. You can't. And there's going to be times where you come into conflict with businesses and you are just going to have to accept that it's going to go south. And there's ways to deal with that. I mean, sometimes, I hate to say it, the answer is you find a new job. If you find a place where you are at such conflict and the board is telling you, I had someone do this to me once. If there's a single data breach, like 0 breaches is the tolerance level, this organization can never tolerate a breach. Well, are you going to invest in it? No. Then you have to go. Like, if the organization is that adamant.
Thank you for saying that. I just want to stop you there really quickly, because so many people don't want to walk away from the title.
Yeah.
And I think that is that you saying that right there is so important. So people that are paying attention to this, please, like, you're right, because the risk for you, the personal liability now, and the reputational damage that you'll carry, I think, it far outweighs your self-respect and your dignity outweighs that. So thank you. Sorry. Thank you for saying that.
No, and we have examples, right? I mean, California has set precedent in case law that you can be held personally liable as an executive for negligence, essentially, if you have a breach happen, because as a security professional, you're supposed to know better. It's literally akin to medical malpractice. You have so much knowledge, you're supposed to know better. We all know big CISOs. The guy I know that I've worked with a long time, who was at very major companies, who had a big breach, kind of out there doing his own thing now because, and not because he's not known in the industry, and everyone who's known the guy knows he's an incredible CISO, but that shadow was there for a long time with him, which was just sad and unfortunate. It really can be a big impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you have to walk away. Like if you've done everything you can do, if you've got a board that's just adamant they won't do anything, you have to sort of just let that business fail and acknowledge that it's not you, and that's what you're going to have to do. Now, there are other ways to try to mitigate this, and I've had really good success with the blue ink pen, which was for me, which was like, look, if you're going to demand accountability in this organization, you're going to demand that we have a perfect security program, and I know that that can't be done. These things are not aligned. Okay, then here's the trade-off. The trade-off is going to be, I'm going to work with general counsel, which this is a true story, to build me exceptional boilerplate language that transfers risk of a particular thing outlined in this document from the company itself to the person. It's a literal transfer of corporate liability to personal liability, and acceptance by the person that they are going to take on that liability. The lawyers, by the way, in my organization at that time, boy, were they happy to do that. Like, I have never had turnaround that fast for legal boilerplate in my life. I almost want to say they were giddy about it. So, yeah, I had this form that I used to give to IT folks, or the CTO at the time, whoever it was, who came in and said, it can't be done. We're not doing that. We're not patching this thing. I said, well, I'm done fighting. I've done all the communication. I've tried to explain to you why this is in our interest to do it. I've talked to the board. The board is adamant that it will be done or else. So here's how it's going to get done. If you don't want to do it, here's this form. Please read it. Please sign it. Mm-hmm. I had one guy refuse to sign it because he said that I had a black ink pen, just like you did, Kayla. And he wouldn't sign it because he said, then you're going to have my signature. And the photocopy machine only does black and white. So you'll be able to redo my signature on these forms because you'll just be able to do a black ink signature every single time with a photocopier. And I said, no problem. I got a blue ink pen out. And I said, sign it with the blue ink. And then you'll know that it's your legitimate signature and it wasn't forged. He didn't like that. But it worked. And I'll tell you, we didn't get that form signed very often. Amazingly, about 85% of my requests that came in for exceptions ended up not being exceptions. The work just got done. So sometimes, even when it seems hopeless, there are ways through it. They can be very extreme. And you have to kind of just accept the fact that you're not going to win. You're not going to get what you need done. You're not going to get that patch deployed or that code fixed or whatever the case is that needs to be done. Find another way. Find some other way to mitigate, to transfer the risk, to do something else to protect yourself and the organization. And at the end of the day, if you can't get there, then you have to accept that organization may fail, and you have to kind of move on from that. And that's heartbreaking for a lot of folks, but I mean, that is the reality of it from my perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely feel all of that, because it kind of also goes back to that concept of burden of knowledge. As a CISO or a senior cybersecurity leader in your organization, you have some very clearly defined duties, particularly if you're a publicly traded organization where you have fiduciary duties, to where no amount of, doing a document saying, I briefed everyone and told them this was the risk and they accepted it anyway, is going to withhold your liability. Yeah. And I loved your blue pen thing. I did security manager work where I had to NDOC and read out people when I was active duty military. And I used a purple pen for the same reason.
See, I'm not crazy about this. I love that.
I used purple just because it was funny to make, some, full word colonel have to write their name in purple.
I love that.
So we've kind of talked about how you got to where you are and how you lead. But at the end of the day, a lot of things doesn't matter if the security doesn't actually hold up. So let's talk about how you build programs, across multiple environments. What's one control or capability you consider as absolutely non-negotiable, regardless of the size of the organization or the industry or where their maturity level is, in the spectrum?
So are we talking about just technical capabilities here?
Whatever you consider a applicable control or capability. Let your imagination run wild.
Well, boy, there's so many ways I can go with this. I think for me, the broadest answer is data and good data. And not to say that you should drive your life by it, but it's really, really hard to make good decisions if you don't know what's happening or you don't know what's going on. So we've been talking about this in the industry forever, right? Visibility. We talk about having visibility capabilities on our network. Lots of different tools for doing that kind of thing. I have a really strong background in vulnerability management. So, for me, having a scanning tool is always a normal thing for me because I'm not just looking for missing patches. I'm looking for all the data. I'm looking for all the asset records and all the services that are running. And I'm looking for ports that are, I kind of want to know everything that's going on because I can't make good decisions from a technical standpoint without it. But data is the key. I think however you're going to get the data to your team and to your program, it's really, really hard to start making decisions about policy that are specific to the business if you don't have a good understanding of what's going on. And even if you have an understanding of what the business wants, right? You work for a retailer, right? And they've got a big e-commerce website and brick and mortar stores on, and you understand how important credit card processing is, and you understand how important the revenue streams are and where it's all out. Great. What's running underneath? All right. Well, if I don't know that, it's really hard as a security professional to say, well, our policy should be X, and our guidelines on how to support that should be Y, and our procedures to manage it will be Z. I don't want to gloss over the fact that understanding the business and all of the soft skills part of it we've been talking about is critical. It is. You can't build a program without that piece. But I just find so often that people go into the technical environments, even with that knowledge, and they say things like, well, I really only care about my data centers and my server farms. So I'll just deploy endpoint security to those, or I'll scan those environments, but I don't care about the workstations. Well, then you don't really understand what's going on in your environment. You have no idea what's really happening. You're going to make bad decisions about your direction and your guidance for your team and your team leads going down. It's just really critical to lay that foundation of accumulating as much data about the environment as you can with whatever tools you need to use to do it, so that you've got a good sense of what you're dealing with and what the problem is. Then that's the moment as a program lead, if you want to call it that, you start to marry the two things together. Like, now I understand the road we're walking on, and I understand the direction, or where we need to go in the map and where the board wants us to go. Do I have the right vehicles to do it? Do I have the right, safety measures to do that? Because if I decide that the way we're going to do this is with a race car, but it turns out we're going over the ocean, this is not going to work really well as we go. So that for me is fundamental. It's build out that foundation of good data analysis and understanding of the environment. I have to have that. I've got to have that understanding so that when I talk to the board, I can translate up to them what their environment is doing, and I can translate back down how we're going to manage this craziness in accordance with what the business wants.
Yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times where you just ask security practitioners, define what an asset is in your organization, and you get a blank stare.
Yeah. Well, and define what it is for everybody else. I mean, I love that analogy personally, because if you talk to somebody in finance, go talk to the CFO and ask them what an asset is. They're going to say things like, "Oh, it's the retirement funds we invest in for our 401ks, and it's our it's the money we've invested in these other startup companies that those are our assets because they're business assets." But that CFO is never going to say our Windows workstations and our Linux servers and our web applications and our credentials. Like those aren't assets to them. Those are weird techie things that I don't understand. So again, don't assume everybody knows what you're talking about with that stuff. It's all different depending on who you're talking to at any given time. So it's important to have that broader understanding of it all if you can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're spot on with, like, organizations are still getting this whole managing risk because they're not doing this analysis across the board. They say, oh, we do a risk assessment once a year for SOC 2 or ISO, and ta-da, we're done. But one of the riskier areas I think of is like the explosion of tools, because they can kind of like leech across and touch everything, right? Do you have like an approach or any advice for folks on how to avoid this tool sprawl while still actually maintaining or even improving their security outcomes?
Yeah, it depends though on what type of CISO you are and where you're at.
Yeah.
So I love the way I always phrase it is a little Big Bang Theory kind of thing is the instant gratification conundrum. That's what I call it. Sometimes you get stuck. And, we talk about CISOs who have, these days, I think it's still a 17-month average tenure, 18-month average tenure for CISOs, something like that. And I've been asked why. Why is that? And I said, well, there's a lot of reasons, but I said part of it is this cycle where if you have a board that doesn't support security, it's not going to really invest in it, doesn't really care. New CISO comes in, is told, go save our day, like go fix everything, go be magic somehow.
Yeah.
Well, if you're that CISO and you realize there's no hope, one of the things you do, I see a lot of them do, is go for instant gratification, right? They go, okay, no problem. I'll go buy the hot new shiny tool. We'll spend a year implementing it. I'll tell the board, look, we're implementing this really great. Look, we're doing work. We're doing stuff. Amazing. We were promised. The vendor told us it's going to do amazing stuff. It's going to be great. And then by the time the tool's implemented and everybody realizes it hasn't changed anything really, your 18 months is up and you move on to the next thing. Yeah. So sometimes tool sprawl is not really your fault. You're trying to protect your job, sadly. And that's a tactic. I think more reasonably for me, we've reached a point where so many of the tools have so much overlap. There's so many tools that do so many of the same things. And yes, best of breed is great. And I like my toys. Like I'm sure both of you do too, right? But sometimes we have to get realistic about that. Do I really need 100% of all the features of my most top-end CSPM tool? Maybe not. Maybe my environment isn't that advanced. We're not really that kind of cloud native, pure cloud company that really needs the full scope of that tool. Maybe 85% is enough. Maybe I can do okay with, my data tool that has some of those capabilities or whatever the case might be. So finding overlaps and being realistic with yourself about you may not have the shiniest of the shiny toys, but sometimes that's okay. I also really heavily lean on leveraging those fundamental data analysis tools. I think a lot of times endpoint tools, vulnerability assessment scanners, your API-based kind of scanning stuff for cloud infrastructure and that kind of thing, those fundamental information gatherers usually gather way more information than you're using them for, right? The number of times that I've had people tell me like, well, yeah, I run, Nessus or Qualys or something, or, Tenable stuff, whatever. And I'm looking for missing patches. That's it. You're not looking at open ports. You're not looking at services. You're not looking at the software installed. You're not looking at configuration settings. You're not looking at network layouts. You're not looking at the routing table. Those tools will tell you all those things. They have all that data in there. So if you're using really expensive network monitoring tools for just basic, what's alive on my network? Well, the endpoint tools can probably tell you that. The scanner tools can probably tell you that. Like you have other tools that can probably tell you that information. Now, you might need some help to aggregate that data. You might need some help to pull the data out and do some good reporting with it. That's a different conversation. But I think trying to deal with the tools explosion right now is find where overlaps exist and be realistic about how much of each tool you really need and then find those data gathering tools and use all the data that they're extracting for you. There's way more there than you realize, and that's going to help resolve some of that too.
So you mentioned shiny tools, so got to bring up the most recent thing, Anthropic's Mythos and ChatGPT, OpenAI's Tax Cyber. Do you think that they are fundamentally breaking vulnerability management, or are they just highlighting, things that we haven't been doing right in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the third consecutive year that AI has hit the mainstream, I have to now repeat yes, it is the end times. It is apocalyptic. Skynet is upon us. The Terminators are coming. It is over. And I'm sorry, we can end this now. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it, everybody. It's been great. I have been looking at a lot of really interesting conversations about all of this. And it's very, very fascinating to me to see kind of both sides of the conversation. And it's tricky because even in forums that I think a lot of people trust to be kind of open and not vendor pushing or anything like that, you can absolutely tell there's a lot of folks that are still staking their flag, based on some personal preference or the company they work for or whatever the case might be. Yeah, I don't think it's the end of times. I don't think this is going to end, what we're talking about, vulnerability management or code assessment or anything like that. Some of this is just how it's communicated. Like, was there a 27-year-old vulnerability found in, it was a BSD? I think it was one of the things, BSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. That's true. That's a good point. How much is BSD? But you look at other conversations. What's the install base for BSD right now in the world? It's like
super tiny,
0.1% or 0.0. It's this really tiny kind of thing. And the vulnerability in question, as some other researchers have looked at it, really isn't all that critical. Like, yes, it's broken code, but it doesn't really do anything too serious. So I hate to say, it's not that big of a deal. It's a really cool thing that it found this broken piece of code in a very old technology, but is it meaningful to what we're doing, in day-to-day work in our lives? I think it's just going to be another shift. Like every other major technical revolution we've seen, cloud computing, virtualization, any of this stuff, right? We every time we come up with these new technologies, we're like, it's the end of data centers. Yeah, there's still data centers. Well, cloud computing is coming. We're never going to have Windows ever again. It's all going to be virtualized. Now we still have Windows everywhere. Like it's still, all that's still happening. It changes. Yeah. So I think we're going to see augmentation of these kinds of tooling. I think you're going to see that AI, for lack of a better term, AI scanners are going to be more deeply embedded into security processes. And I think they're going to be much earlier in the process. You're going to see it more aligned with dev tools. And just built into those kinds of environments to let the devs know, hey, that code you just wrote, not good. Go back and rewrite that before you even push this to the repository. Rewrite that code.
Yeah.
We're going to get closer and closer to that kind of thing. But the part that we often forget about things like vulnerability analysis, and I'm using that because you specifically mentioned that term, Joshua. Vulnerability analysis is not about detecting patches or missing patches. Right? Vulnerability analysis is about, yes, identifying a weakness, but then it's about determining criticality. It's about determining impact. It's building the risk profile for that. It's making decisions about what to do about that risk profile. It's about advising the business on how to solve that risk profile. Like, there's a lot more involved in a proper vulnerability assessment or vulnerability management program than just run, scanner, output, report, patch.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think
I can't just use the CVE
of course
SS score and call it good.
Yes, of course you can. Of course you can. You know what? And you can sit here in the corner cubicle and we're going to set you up with a nice network and you can do that all day long. It'll be awesome. If I could pat you on the head right now, just out of sheer, ironic sort of thing here, I would, but kidding. I agree with 100%. Like there's so much more to that, but we're still 2026. We still have people doing it that way. We still have people who just run it going, well, here's the list of patches. And IT won't deploy them. So my job is over. I don't know what to do. That is not your job. right? Understanding the business, identifying criticality, bringing, are there mitigating controls? Are there other factors? Do you have other things in place? Like, part of the security practitioner's job is to make that decision about what's the right way to respond to this particular vulnerability, i.e. risk. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I think that part, even with AI and the capabilities there's still too much of a business and too much of a human factor in those decisions that it's going to be really hard, even for very specifically trained models within an environment, to be able to do that accurately and confidently every time. So, maybe I don't have a team, a big enough team to patch everything. We're going to take a different tack than the company over here has a massive team. Maybe my company has that zero tolerance risk policy, and I have to handle this thing in an absolute manner. Where another company's like, yeah, we've got good insurance. We're comfortable if something happens. We're prepared. Good disaster recovery. Good, all that stuff. We're good. We obviously don't want to happen, but we're prepared. Well, that gives me a slightly different decision-making capability about what I'm going to do about a given risk. So, still really critical.
You're absolutely right, though, because you need to have the human in the loop piece for that, because it's the decision making and the risk analysis tied to the business. So I think that's absolutely spot on. I completely agree with you on that one.
And let me add really quickly, like, go through this exercise with your own companies. If you're concerned about AI, do a simpler one. I have yet to have a person agree with the following statement. Someone tells me, I want fully automated patch management. Just deploy it all the time. And I say, I don't think that's really what you want. And they go, it absolutely is. And I said, great. Here's what that would look like. We detect patch. 2 seconds later, we immediately deploy the patch. We reboot the system. Patch is applied. Everything's good. They go, whoa. You can't just 2 seconds after. I need to make sure that that's the right system. I need to make sure that patch isn't going to break things. I need to make sure that's a good time to reboot. Oh, so you don't really want fully automated patch management. You still want a process in the middle of that where the human decides this is still a good thing or not a good thing. And you watch everybody kind of go, oh, yeah, I guess that's what I want.
Yeah.
So AI is going to be the exact same thing. In my mind, it's the same conversation.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're in the last few minutes of the episode here. So we always end Criticality Live with a set of core questions for our audience to kind of have like these, like, take it with you insights that they can, start to use right away. So if you could fix one thing about the cybersecurity industry overnight, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be, but what would you want to fix?
The notion that it's a purely technical discipline. We really have to get away from that we are just IT and purely technical. We have to get back to the thing that we are in risk management. Like, we are a communications function in the organization. We have to be technical to understand it. You can't escape that. But we've got to get over this notion that every problem is solved purely by tech. We are legitimately in a people business, and that needs to change, that mindset.
That's great.
All right. So what's one practice, it could be technical or cultural, that you wish organizations would stop doing immediately?
Assigning users computers. Like, just take the computers away completely. All our problems would go away if we just stopped using the things. I think the one that stands out to me in a lot of ways is that we are often too bent on the notion of convenience over construction, essentially, or constructiveness for the organization. I see a lot of times people just make decisions like, well, it's just easier to give everybody admin access. Well, it's just easier to let the devs do what they want and think, because we want to build fast. Well, it's just easier. Like, I'm tired of everybody complaining that their passwords are too long, or whatever the thing is. Well, I get it. And security, we work really hard to try to make it as little of an inconvenience as possible. And we try really, really hard to make this as invisible as we can. We've gotten a lot better over the last 20, 30 years, but you can't let convenience drive the decisions. Sometimes hard decisions do have to be made. And especially as Kayla, to your point, as fast as everything's moving right now, sometimes you have to just say, right now, the answer is no. And I'm sorry, but that's what we need to do. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. For our listeners who want to follow your work or reach out, what's the best way?
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. I'm always kind of there and popping around a little bit, so feel free to reach out to me. Nathan Wenzler, that should be about the only one, I think. Happy to talk to folks there from there.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Criticality Live. So huge thanks to our guest, Nathan Wenzler. And an even bigger thanks to you for hanging out with us and being a part of our growing community of leaders who are done with buzzwords and are ready for real conversations. If you got value out of our episode today, hit the follow button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop us a review here on LinkedIn, Spotify, or on our on-demand YouTube channel. It helps us far more than you know. And of course, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Secure Nation, for powering this conversation. They're helping organizations defend smarter, respond faster, and make cybersecurity something that actually works. So go check them out. This has been Criticality Live, where we cut through the noise and get to what really matters. See you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.